Rabbi say. There was a joke going around not too long ago. Not really very funny. It's a little bit too true. A pit bull dog attacked a little girl in Paris. You saw it? No. Attacked a little girl in Paris, mauling the child, putting her life in danger. And a young man ran up, pulled off the dog, and killed him. Saved the girl's life. And there were some reporters around. It was a public place. And they surrounded him. What's your name? There's going to be a headline in the paper tomorrow. Brave Parisian saves child from dog. And he said, but I don't live in Paris. I'm not from Paris. All right, brave Frenchman saves little girl from wild dog. But I'm not a Frenchman. Brave European saves little girl from dog. I'm not a European. Where are you from? I'm from Israel. Israeli kills little girl's pet dog. It's funny, but it's not funny. Because that's the world we live in. That's the world we live in. Older people, even older than I, that's old, say that this makes what's going on today in the world makes them remember the 1930s, what it was like in Germany, in Western Europe, and certainly in Poland, Hungary, Russia, Eastern Europe. You know, we have a problem with Tisha B'Av. And the problem with Tisha B'Av is very simple. It's ancient history. What does it mean to us? Rabbi Groner just said there'll be a shir in Kamsa Bar Kamsa. I'm sure that the Maggid Shir will teach Kamsa Bar Kamsa as it applies to us. But it's hard. It's hard. Kamsa Bar Kamsa, party, Romans, carbon. You walk out in the street. Did you ever see Kamsa Bar Kamsa? Did you ever see a Roman? Are we afraid to walk in the street? So far not. So what does it mean to us? The truth is, it's a sad truth, that Kamsa Bar Kamsa really does not mean very much to us. But Tisha B'Av should. Tisha B'Av should, because Tisha B'Av is not just something that happened in the Midbar, that happened in the first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash. Not even just something that happened with the Spanish Inquisition. There's a long list of things that happened on Tisha B'Av. World War I was declared on Tisha B'Av. The liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto began on Tisha B'Av. And who knows? Who knows what Tisha B'Av may be in Halavai never. But who knows what it might be in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. I know people who had to leave Paris. They had to move out of Paris because of anti-Semitism. In the year 2010, anti-Semitism, attacks, vandalism against Jews increases, doubles almost, in every country in Europe. Even in England, civilized England, democratic England. And who knows? Who knows if it might yet come to the United States? Halavai not. Imagine, Rabbi say, just imagine. What would happen if, Rahman al-Itzlan, Israel has to attack Iran to prevent it from getting an atomic bomb? Something that our leader, President Obama, is afraid to do. There'll be retaliation. Iranian ships will block the Persian Gulf. Oil will not be able to come from Saudi Arabia and the small emirates there, which supply 35% of the world's oil. Gasoline in the United States might go up to $10 a gallon. And whose fault will it be? Whose fault will it be? Your fault, because you're Jews. It's a terrible scenario. Halavai, it should never happen. But can we imagine that it could happen? Can't we imagine that it could happen? Starting in the middle of anti-Semitism used to be a religious thing. Halacha b'yadua esav sayin aliyakov, but in the Western world, the civilized world, the Christian world, anti-Semitism was a religious thing. Jews refused to accept the Christian Savior. But if a Jew wanted to convert, kol hakavod, convert, see the true faith. And then it changed. It stopped being a religious thing. And this goes back 150 years or so ago, 160 years or so ago. For the first time, Jews were considered to be bad, a danger to the world, not because we had the wrong religion, not because we believed in the Torah, but because we were a different kind of race and we contaminated the world. A Jew contaminated the world. Remember, when I was young, I don't know if the readers in the first grade, the little primers were the same when you were young as when I was young. Remember there used to be Dick and Jane and Spot? And who was the smartest one of the three? Spot. In Germany in the 1930s, there was a reading primer for little German children. And a mother is telling her children, her Siegfried and Brunhilde, that one cockroach can spread disease and make a whole village sick. And that's why when we see a cockroach, we have to kill it. And that's what the Jews are. The Jews contaminate the whole country. So we have to get rid of them. And the poison gas that was used in Auschwitz, Zyklon B, was an insecticide. It was an insecticide. It was used by exterminators. And there's something very symbolic in that. The same poison that they used to kill roaches and vermin is what they used to kill Jews. Because a Jew is not a mensch. A Jew is an untermensch, a subhuman. So when we're talking about Tisha B'Av, think about this. Pick up a book about the Second World War, of what was done to Jews in the Second World War. And then think that this is the long stretch of history that began with Tisha B'Av when the Meraglim came back in the Midbar. It's all Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av means all the suffering of Jews, of Acheinu B'nai Yisrael, because the Rabbi Shalom chose us, and the guy cannot tolerate that. That's what Tisha B'Av is. It became convenient, not just convenient, it became a real matter of policy to talk about never again. The Jews in Europe went like sheep to the slaughter. And it won't happen again because there's a new kind of Jew. There's a new kind of Jew who can fight and Israel is a superpower, and we can beat anybody. And there was a whole propaganda apparatus, a re-education apparatus to teach Jewish children that the Jews who were killed in Europe, the 6 million who were killed in Europe, the 6 million Kedoshim, that we have to be ashamed of them because they didn't fight back. You know, there are prisoner of war camps. There are hundreds of thousands, much more than 1 million. Russian prisoners of war, American prisoners of war, British prisoners of war, French prisoners of war, soldiers who were captured in battle. There is not one case of a prisoner of war camp where there was an uprising against the Germans. And these were young men in the prime of life. They were trained fighters, trained killers. And they were pretty well fed. Prisoners of war were pretty well fed. They lived under very harsh conditions, but they weren't starved to death like the Jews in the concentration camps and in the ghettos. Not one case of a prisoner of war camp where there was a rebellion. There were Jewish rebellions, doomed to failure. There were some. A lot more than there were by Russian and American and British and French soldiers. A lot more. But there was another kind of heroism. There was a spiritual heroism. The Nazis tried to turn Jews into animals. Remove their dignity, humiliate them. Let them fight for a piece of bread. Let them fight each other for a piece of bread. And it hardly ever happened. They hardly ever succeeded. Rabbi said, let me tell you some stories. In the Warsaw Ghetto, where to have a yeshiva, to teach Torah, was a crime and you could be shot on the spot. And there were chadurim. There were yeshivas underground, in basements, and hidden in attics. And a Rabbi is teaching little kids, 8, 9-year-old children, teaching them Parshat Todos, Yaakov and Esav. And a little kid pipes up and he says, that means we're Yaakov and the Germans are Esav. I don't want to be Esav. I want to be Yaakov. Some of the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto were little children. Do you know why? Because in the wall around the ghetto, there were cracks in the wall. There were tiny little spaces sometimes. And these little children, first of all, they were young and they were small, and they were as skinny as can be because they were starving. They could squeeze through some of these openings, some of these cracks in the wall. And they could go out and buy food or steal food and come back so that their families would have something to eat. And one of these little heroes was a boy named Shmilik. And Shmilik used to go out every once in a while from the ghetto and come back with food, fill his pockets with food. And once a Polish policeman saw him sneaking back into the ghetto, and he is crawling into that little space. And it took a while to get through because it was a very small space, and he had to squeeze through. And this policeman was beating him with his stick as he was trying to get through. And he came out and he was black and blue all over. And he ran home with the food. He didn't want to say anything to his parents. They were suffering enough. Didn't say anything. Kept his pain to himself. And his mother, Shmilik, hero, brought back food. We can eat. We can have a nice, have a little bit more to eat on Shabbos than we normally would. And there was a secret underground minyan, and Shmulek used to go to that minyan with his father. And that Shabbos morning, his father got up, and Shmulek heard him, and he also got up. And his father said, "No, you can't come." "Why can't I come?" "Because it's dangerous. It's dangerous. We're afraid the Germans know about us. The Nazis, they're going to come. And the children, they won't be quiet, and they'll find us. And if we get caught, we get caught. We don't want the children to be caught. You can't come." Can't come. His father went alone. And Shmulek was a tough little kid. He decided that he was going to go also. And he came, and he went to this sub-cellar, and he knocked. Nobody answered, and he knocked. And they heard the knocking inside, and they were sure, must be police. They're caught. And they gave each other chizuk. "We go al Kiddush Hashem, we're going to go bravely." And they opened the door, and it was Shmulek. And his father was furious. And he slapped him. And now he couldn't, this little hero, couldn't hide the pain anymore. When the policeman beat him, he didn't cry, and now he cried, and he said, "I'm also a Jew, and I also want to daven." Sheep to the slaughter. There was a roundup in Auschwitz. If I remember correctly, it was 1,400 Jewish children. 1,400 Jewish children. In this Erev Rosh Hashanah, they were rounded up, and they were put inside a fence, and they're going to be taken to the gas chambers. No food, no water. Why? Why bother feeding them? They're going to be killed anyway. And all these children are in there, hundreds and hundreds of children. There was a Rav there in Auschwitz, Rav Meisels. He was a survivor. Weizsäcker Rav, he was Rav in Chicago. Major Talmud Chacham, Ungarish Rav, but even the Telzer Yeshiva in Chicago, all the Litvish Yeshivalite used to come to him with their shilas. And he was there. Auschwitz was a slave labor camp. The death camp was a couple of miles away, Birkenau, and these kids were waiting to be driven along the road to Birkenau. And a father, came over to the Weizsäcker Rav. And he said, "I have money. I smuggled in money. And I can ransom out my son. I can pay off the Jewish guards to let my son out." But the Nazis keep count. They know exactly how many children are there. And if my son comes out and they count and they see that there's somebody missing, they'll take another child. Am I allowed to save my son's life? The Rav didn't want to answer him. He says, "I don't know. I don't know." He knew, but he didn't want to answer him. He's not going to tell a father, let your son go to the shechita. And the father came back again another time. And he said, "Rabbi, what should I tell you? It's a hard shaila. I don't have any svarim here. There are no other rabbanim I have no one to discuss it with. I can't answer you." And the father said, "I did what a Jew has to do. I have a shaila. I asked the Rav. If the Rav can't tell me that I'm allowed to do it, it means I'm not allowed to do it. So this will be my Akedah. My son will go to the Akedah." Isn't that heroism? Are these people not heroes? But we can make a big difference. We can make a big difference. It's one thing, and it's important. It's an important thing. It's an essential thing for us to feel that the Tisha B'Av is our Tisha B'Av. But we also have to look for ways to make a positive difference, to make a Kiddush Hashem, to do what we can to bring the Geula. Let me tell you two stories. And these are not stories that went from person to person to person. You know, stories improve with the telling. The first one was told by Rabbi Yankiv Kamenetsky, who was very, very careful with the details of a story. There was a Rav in Minsk, in present-day Belarus. His name was Rabbi Horodner. And he, under the communists, in the 1920s and the early 1930s, maintained a yeshiva in Minsk. And it was a crime to have a yeshiva under the communists. He could have been shot, or at the very least would have been sent to Siberia. But he did it. And he used to walk around outside the yeshiva, clean the windows, look busy. And if he saw police coming, he would give a signal, tricky, and all the kids would run away. And then once he was picked up by the secret police, NKVD. He was arrested. They took him to headquarters. And they put him in a room, all alone, and kept him there for hours. And that was a terror tactic. You're there, and you have no one to talk to, and you have nothing to do, and you're just waiting and anticipating the worst. Who knows what's going to happen? Terror. I mean, we can't imagine the terror that people could feel under the communists. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, did not shuckle during Shemoneh Esrei. When he davened Shemoneh Esrei, he stood straight. And he said the reason is he was arrested by the NKVD, and when he was being questioned, he was so frightened that he couldn't move. And he said to himself, if I could be so frightened and not be able to move when I'm talking to a boss of a dom, when I'm standing in front of the Rabbani Shloi, I'm davening Shemoneh Esrei, I should be less afraid. And after that, he never shuckled during Shemoneh Esrei. And here's this Rav, Rav Horodner, and finally he's taken in to the commander. And the commander's told the cops, the simple policeman, I want to speak to this man alone. He closed the door. And the NKVD officer, high officer, said, Ich bin Ayid. Ich bin Ayid. Do you remember there was an almana named Chaike who lived near the railroad tracks in Minsk? No, you didn't remember. Chaike was my mother. We were very poor. And you used to raise money. You used to raise money for poor families. And you used to give her money. And she came to you once right before Pesach. And she said, I have nothing to make Pesach with. And you said, I can't help you. I gave out all the money. I have nothing left. I have no money left. And then you said, wait. And you went over to a cabinet and you took out a silver piece. A leichter, something of silver, and you gave it to her, and you said, sell it, you'll be able to make Yom Tov. And the officer said to Rav Horodner, you think we don't know what you're doing? We have a folder on you this thick. And he pulled out a folder. Everything that you've been doing all these years is in this folder. And I've been protecting you. because of what you did for my mother. But in 6 months, I'm going to be promoted and I'm going to be sent to a different city. And the one who comes after me is not going to protect you. So listen to me. Leave the country. As fast as you can, leave the country. You see what a chesed can do? A simple chesed to him was just a simple thing. No money. She has no money. So he's a silver leichter. So he wouldn't have a silver leichter. So what? Look what it accomplished. All these children for these years were able to learn, were able to remain Yidden. And it saved his life. One more story, and then we'll daven Ma'ariv. Can I steal another 3-4 minutes? There was Rosh Hashiva Rabbi Yisrael Gustman. He's an Odom Gadol Ad Ma'od. When he was in his early 20s, he was on the Bezdin of Reb Chaim Ozer in Vilna. Can you imagine that? Reb Chaim Ozer was the Gadol Ador. And this young man in his 20s is on Reb Chaim Ozer's Bezdin. He was once walking with Reb Chaim Ozer outside of the town. Reb Chaim Ozer told him, you see there in the woods behind those trees, there's a cave. There's a cave there. Very few people know about it. There's a cave. And he showed him some things that were growing. He says, this is poisonous. But this, a person can eat. And he was wondering what's Chaim Ozer talking about, a cave, and what you can eat and what you can't eat. It was strange. During the war, he found refuge in that cave. And he was able to survive by picking those plants that were edible. But he had a yeshiva in America, and he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He had a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael called Netzach Yisrael. And he said a shir every day for his Talmidim. And on Thursday afternoons, he used to say a pilpul shir that was open to the public. And Rosh Yeshiva came, and Rabbonim came, lawyers came, doctors came, professors came. It was an amazing Talmud Chacham. One of the people who came was an economics professor in Hebrew University, Robert Alman, Yisrael Alman. He won the Nobel Prize for economics about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I think it was. Yid, nice white beard, it was Choshev Yid. And he used to come to the shir, never missed. He had a son who was a Maggid Shir in a Mesifta in Yerushalayim. He was in the Army Reserves. He was called up in 1981 in the first Lebanon War. He was killed in action. And the body was brought back to Yerushalayim for Kvura. And Rav Gustman said that the yeshiva get buses, the whole yeshiva is going to go to the Levaya, and of course he went to the Levaya. After the Levaya, he went to the Shiva home, and he sat down next to Professor Aumann. And he sat with him. And the professor said, Rabbi, I'm grateful you came to the Levaya. The yeshiva came to the Levaya. You came to the house. But you have to go back to the yeshiva. You don't have to stay here. And this is what he answered him. He said, in Vilna, I had a little son, Meir. And I was holding him in my arms. And a German soldier came and pulled him away from me and shot him before my eyes. I was able to run away. I was able to escape. Not long after that, I took Meir's shoes and I traded them for food. But I couldn't eat it. I couldn't eat it. I gave it away to other Yidden. Every night when I go to sleep, I see those shoes. And my Meir was Mekabel Panim. He greeted your son in the Olam HaEmes. And he said to him, I was a Kodesh and you were a Kodesh. But you had the schus of dying for the sake of other Yidden, to save Jewish lives. I did not have that schus. And Rav Gustman said, I was not able to sit Shiva for my mayor. Let me sit with you. Rabbi say, what a difference. Can you imagine what this meant to everybody who was there, not just to the father, but to everybody who was there, to feel an achrayus for another Jew. Rav Gustman, Rav Horodner, and so many others, to feel a responsibility for another Jew. Little things. There was a Rebbe, Chassidish Rebbe, he was Nebuch Nifta young. He told me, people come to me and they tell me their tzaras. And it's heartbreaking to listen to them. But they have no one else to talk to. He said, it will kill me. But they have no one else to talk to. And he died in his 40s. It did kill him. But look how many people he helped. Feel a responsibility for something else. You got a problem? Tell me. Tell me what's the problem. Let's talk about it together. How come, I'm your friend. Why are you doing this? I'm not a guy, I'm not a frummie, I'm not giving you musser. Why? We have to be better than that. So it's 90 degrees outside. So because 90 degrees you can't wear tzitzis. And when it comes from a friend, it's altogether different. It's not a parent bawling out a child. It's not a Rebbe giving musar. It's a friend. It's a friend. It makes such a big difference in life. And things like that, chesed like that can be the schus that'll bring the geula. And it'll make this, halavai, next week Tisha B'Av should be a day of simcha, but if not this week, then next year for sure.